Please note this podcast discusses real-life crimes and may include sensitive topics such as violence, abuse, and other disturbing content. We recommend listener discretion.
The hostage-taking is because the prison staff have been at war with him. The word scapegoat comes to me because the public at large want a rogues gallery, they want an evil man to hate, and Charlie sounds like that. He's not.
I'm journalist Helen Fospero.
I'm crime reporter Martin Brunt.
And this is True Criminals.
A journey into the darkest corners of the criminal underworld with insights from decades of true crime reporting.
The stories behind the stories, plus exclusive interviews with those closely involved in notorious cases.
Re-examining crimes so shocking, they still haunt our imaginations.
In the last episode, we told the story of Charles Bronson's life, including 50 years behind bars. Many of those decades were spent in solitary confinement, after Bronson attacked guards and took hostages, all while people convicted of more serious crimes like murder and rape have quietly done their time and walked free. In this second episode, we'll talk to retired prison psychiatrist Bob Johnson, who's known Bronson since the 1990s, examined him and recommended ways he could be rehabilitated. Bob will give us a rare glimpse into Bronson's mindset and outlook. But first, Martin, just remind us who Charles Bronson is and how he ended up being known as Britain's most notorious prisoner.
Helen, it's a job to know where to start. Bronson is a paradox, a Koestler award-winning artist. That's an award made for prisoners. But he's also the man who held an art teacher hostage for 44 hours. Go back to 1974. A botched heist landed the 22-year-old Michael Peterson, as he was then, a Luton boy with a gentle soul, according to his aunt, landed him behind bars. And it was then that the chaos began. Renaming himself Charles Bronson, he turned prisons into a personal war zone, if you like, taking hostages, smashing cells, and defying every rule. "Violence makes me madder and stronger," he once declared, and he certainly lived that. He took 11 hostages, battered more than 20 prison guards, and caused £500,000 worth of damage. That's quite a record. Critics, and there are lots of those, call him a monster. But supporters, and there are a lot of those as well, they see a man broken by the system. Now, Bronson's an old man these days. He's 72 years old. He writes poetry. He makes art. He can be very articulate.
"I'm an artist, born again. I hate violence. I despise it. And that's all I've done for the last 10 years, sitting in my cell. Model prisoner. Polite, respectful. And they still won't let me out."
And he hasn't been violent for several years. His last conviction inside prison goes back, I think, 10 years. So the question is, should he still be behind bars when murderers and rapists, as he always points out, have done far less time and then gone free?
Well, to help us answer that question and delve into Bronson's psyche and what makes him tick, I feel we're really lucky, actually, to be joined by one of the few people who know him well, Dr. Bob Johnson. Bob, welcome to True Criminals.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
We're very glad to have you too. Tell us, first of all, how you first came across Bronson and what are your memories of that first meeting with him?
Very deeply embedded in my mind. I arrived in Parkhurst on July the 1st, 1991, which was a Monday, and I did the job that I was meant to do, which was to deal with the Special Unit C Wing. So I interviewed all the prisoners that would see me in C Wing. And then John Marriott, the rather naughty governor, said, "Right, now go and see Charlie Bronson." I'd never heard of him. He was in the SEG unit. He was nothing to do with me employment-wise. So I went to see him and took a careful history, as I always did. And then towards the end, I sensed something slightly amiss. And he reached across this table, grabbed my entire notes for the week, since they were all in one pile, and said, "These are my notes." And I said, "Only the top pages, Charlie." So he peeled off the top pages, handed the rest back to me, very gentlemanly, and shredded them into postage stamp sized and threw them all over the place. So, in fact, looking back at that, it was quite wrong of the governor to do that. I think there was a hidden agenda in his mind. Right, we've got this college boy, we'll show him what the prison is really like. And if he'd hit me, or whatever, take me hostage or kidnap me, whatever, it could have ended my prison career. And I think John Marriott had something of that in the back of his mind. Quite extraordinary. Anyway, that meeting cemented a relationship with Charlie all the way through.
Bob, what did you make of him at that time? Because you were, in your time at Parkhurst, you were talking to all sorts of very, very violent men. 60 murderers, some serial killers. How did you view Bronson, perhaps in comparison with those other men of violence?
He related very straightforward and all the way through. I've written reports on him, medical reports, I think probably 4 or 5 in total, 2 of which he's published verbatim in his book. That must be unique in that the prisoner takes his reports as beneficial and publishes them verbatim. And he's a remarkable man, absolutely remarkable. You mentioned in the intro his time in solitary confinement. Some of his letters make me weep. He says, "I haven't said good morning to anybody all day, 24 hours without saying hello." Now, human beings are social species. They interact, they chat, they talk, they say good morning. He's been directly abused by the system. And if I may refer back to the first time I met Martin, was 2003, 2002, outside the Court of Appeal.
The Old Bailey.
The Old Bailey, sorry, interviewing me for Sky TV. And I said the prison service, at that stage he'd been in prison for 26 years, has a lot to answer for. If you say in your introduction that his aunt said he was a gentle soul, I think that's true. He didn't have any, in the back of his mind, any of this, what I call unprocessed rage. For example, there was a serial killer in Sea Wing, called him Alec. He was 24 when he came, and he was going to kill every 2 years. That's what he did. Now, to do that, you have to have what I call volumes of unprocessed rage. And he was a very meticulous lad, this Alec, and he was going to plan, he was going to sort it all out, and that's what he was going to do. Fortunately, we talked it through and we worked it out. So this he didn't. He hasn't killed since. I've met him since, and he hasn't killed since. Now, Charlie was benign. Charlie didn't have a volcano of rage. He was treated appallingly in the prison system. He told me one time that he'd get transferred to a new prison. 6 of the staff would line up, say, "Here he comes, right, whoa, we'll take him out." So they used to attack him, they kicked him. At one time, I had to do a medical report on him as a general practitioner. I'm a member of the Royal College of GPs. I did a report on him. He'd been kicked in the kidneys. He'd passed blood in his urine, and he was terrified they would kick the other kidney, and that would be the end of him. You cannot live without kidneys, and he was about to be killed. At that point, he had footprints on his scalp. There's only one way of getting footprints on your scalp. And this is meant to be a civilized country. This is the prison service making people worse, costing a lot of money, as you say, £500,000 in damage. But over the years, he's in maximum security now. That's probably what, $250,000, $500,000 a year?
Bob, one of the issues you identified in Charlie Bronson's background was an emotional dependence on his mother. How did that affect his behaviour?
Of the people that I've known over the 30-what years since I've been seeing people like this, he's so mild. The dependence on his mother was there, and it may have been some off remark I may have made in that very first interview about his mother. I can't really recall. But it wasn't as severe. My model is as follows. You're growing up, you're looked after by your parents, and your parents wean you emotionally. That's to say, they treat you to live on your own, make your own decisions. Now, some people are better at this than others, and some not. If it goes wrong, or you're neglected, or you build up this rage inside, then you take it out on society, on murder victims, on crime, or whatever it is. You get it off your system. You're taking revenge for what happened to you. Now, there wasn't a lot of revenge in Charlie. It never was.
So what was it then, Bob, even though he seems certainly a more gentle soul now in prison, he was violent in his early days. What caused that? Did you look into what had caused him to behave the way he did, which landed him originally in jail?
I agree. And he was insecure. And at one stage he was out of prison and had a shotgun. And so that was criminalised, having a shotgun. Now, the reason he had a shotgun was because he was insecure. Fine, that's insecurity. Now, what should it...
That's not much of a defence, though, Bob, is it?
Well, it's a defence against what happened to him. A lot of people are insecure. You take an insecure person, you put them in a prison and he's attacked, which he was regularly. Then that's going to, like he says, he makes it into a war zone. Who made it a war zone? Who allows the war zone to continue? I tried very hard while I was at Parkhurst to have him come into Sea Wing. I got wrapped over the knuckles because they said, you shouldn't go against the, not singing from the same hymn sheet or something. He's just taken the deputy governor kidnapped, so we can't have him. That's exactly why he should be there. That's exactly why he should have come. Rehabilitation is on the moniker for the prisons, and rehabilitation was contrary in this case. He was unrehabilitated.
How did you get him to control his outbursts? And how did you deal with the other men of violence? You had a different approach that the prison system wasn't used to.
Oh, absolutely. But what the prison system does is to treat them like infants. Controls them, you can't do this, you can't do that, can't do the other. What I did, I was transferred agency. I said, you're a responsible adult. Do you want to come and see me? I had a system of consent, right? So I wouldn't see them without an appointment. I make an appointment, say, come and see me tomorrow at 11. Oh, I'm not coming. It's a maximum security wing. They can't go anywhere except come and see me or not. One chap walked around me for 9 months saying, I said, come to see me tomorrow, fat chance. I come to see me tomorrow, fat chance. Suddenly he said yes. And what was he doing in those 9 months? He was seeing if I wrote in the notes, treatment resistant, refuses to participate. No, it has to be his consent. My mind is clear. He has to make up his own mind. And this is the same with Charlie.
So you're giving Charlie some respect, which sounds like it was missing with his relationship with the prison staff and the guards.
You mentioned the word respect. In one of his letters, he says, you were never attacked because you respected us. That's absolutely right. And what does respect mean? Respect means, well, you're a big lad now, make up your own decisions. Grow up emotionally. I mean, that's the simplest way of saying growing emotionally. How Charlie has managed to keep himself intact over the years, I do not know.
Bob, your fundamental approach was to talk to them.
Yes.
Rather than give them drugs. I mean, is that's perhaps oversimplifying it?
No, that's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. And that applies right across psychiatry as far as I'm concerned. The psychiatrists in the States took a decision in 1980 to move into drugs away from talk, quite explicit and quite wrong. And my task now in retirement is to try and get them to move back. So I went in there and there were 3.5 kilograms of drugs, tranquilizing drugs every year. In the first year. By the time I left, it was down 150 grams. That's for the entire wing. And that shows that basically what my predecessor did and what the standard psychiatric approach is, drug them, zombify them, take them out of their own mind, wrong. My thing is, these are human beings. They are responsible inside and they need to be brought up to be responsible.
And amazingly, your work and methods, I gather, was seen as somewhat controversial.
In Sue's book, she described, we thought the prisoners would be the problem. No. We thought the staff would. No. It's the psychiatrists. The psychiatrists talk to these people and they don't respond because they don't talk to them in the right way. And so they say, well, these people are untreatable. Now, I demonstrated that they were treatable. I was demonstrated that if you talk to people as if they're adults, and treat them like adults and expect them and respect them to be adults, they grow up emotionally. Because inside every human being, this is what they taught me, every human being is born lovable, sociable, and non-violent. And if you find somebody not doing that, that's the way they've been taught. And it's your task as a prison service, as a psychiatrist, anybody, or a member of society, is to educate them back to where they were. This idea that they're born that way, it's in the genes, they're evil, makes me sick.
So what happened to your programme at Parkhurst? The Home Office didn't like it, did they?
It was too successful. It was too successful. The special unit in the Sea Wing lasted 10 years. The first 7 years, every year there were 20 alarm bells on average. That's violence, something's happening, a riot. The last 3 years, there were no alarm bells at all. None. Zero alarm bells. So therefore, the violence had evaporated. And the prison staff were much less sick leave. They were having an interesting life. One of the brightest principal officers in Parkhurst moved onto C Wing because it was the cutting edge, which it was. But unfortunately, the prison inspector came round in October 94. And on the team, there was a prominent forensic psychiatrist. Now, he had spent all his life saying that psychopaths are untreatable. So I'm the only person named in the report. Dr. Johnson's got to do A, B, and C. And it's anecdotal that he's made any improvement. All around him, they were taking open university courses. They were taking literacy classes again. They were cheering up. They were smiling at each other. The staff were having a lovely time. At last, they were having a lovely time. The prisoners said to the prison inspector team, "It's great here. We can do this, that, and the other." Right? This is a maximum security wing, right? So the prisoners loved it. The psychiatrists didn't.
And a year after that, the Home Office shut down your programme, or there were budget cuts that meant you left Parkhurst. Do you remember that very moving letter that Charlie Bronson wrote to you? Let me just quote a bit. He said, "To you, it's a rare sight to see a doctor stand up to the system. I know it will be a bad blow for many who will now be lost and have nothing more than a hell existence, a solitary survival. And all for trying to help themselves to be normal people. It's a sign of the times to put us in cages and forget us completely." That's a very articulate image of Charles Bronson writing to you about your departure.
Oh, absolutely. And that's not the least of it. That letter he repeated several times. I've got one here from the 20th of November 2003. Dr. Bod, good to see you today. Sorry it's still closed visits. And then he mentions, "You will recall when I tore up our notes in a moment's madness." Funny now, right? It's been a lot of in despair since, but I'm proud, listen to this bit, "and I'm proud to say you have never once turned your back on me. Respect as ever." Now that's the difference. I said, here is a man, here's a human being I'm relating to. I don't say, here's an evil man, done dreadful things. We may well have done dreadful things, but inside there's a human being that needs respect. Give him respect and he stops being dangerous.
That was in 2002, 2003, when you were assessing him again for a second period. How much of a changed man was he at that stage?
He was going through regularly, getting stronger and stronger all the way through. And as you mentioned in the intro, that it's probably for the last 10 years he hasn't hit anybody. And what he's met, and what I deplore with everything I've got, is the vindictive nature of the justice system, the prison system. I think it's absolutely appalling. He is now safe enough to be released. But I must say, having been incarcerated for 50 years, he's been debilitated by that. He went in before council tax, before all these things happened and changed, all the social media and stuff. He would need very careful rehabilitation. But I tell you something, it'd be much cheaper.
And what kind of rehabilitation do you think he would need, Bob, to help him adapt to a normal life? He's been locked up in a tiny cell for 50 years.
Exactly so. He's got friends outside. I've met one of the people who was agitating to do it. But I'm afraid my assessment of the justice system, the prison system, is such that they're too vindictive to let him out. But that's quite wrong. It's quite unjust. It's quite uncivilized. He would need very careful protection from people, fortune hunters. He had this thing about his son who took advantage of him and so on and so forth. So a lot of risk there because he's a famous name and his cartoons are remarkable and he gives a lot to charity from them. Fantastic. And he's a remarkable man. He's got an incredible, articulate brain. He thinks a lot and he'd need a lot of social support. Now, I would offer through this program to support him as much as I could. No problem. I offered to visit him. In fact, going through the documents now, I think we applied to visit him 12 months ago. We've heard nothing. We're not allowed to visit him.
If you like the show and want to listen ad-free, head over to patreon.com/True Criminals. You can now subscribe to our ad-free tier for just £4 a month and get unlimited access to our entire back catalogue, completely uninterrupted.
Or if you love the show and want to support what we do, you can become a True Criminals Insider.
For just £3 a month, becoming an insider means you're directly supporting the podcast you love. Your support helps us create even more captivating stories and dive deeper into the most gripping true crime cases. It keeps the show going and the stories alive.
So whether you want ad-free listening or to help support the show, head over to patreon.com/True Criminals and choose the option that works for you.
Thanks for listening and for all your support. We couldn't do this without you.
Step into the world of Cold War summitry with Creating History. From Kennedy and Khrushchev's nuclear brinkmanship to Nixon's high-wire act between Beijing and Moscow, and onto Reagan and Gorbachev rewriting the rules. Explore the handshakes, glares and gambles of summits that redrew the 20th century. Stream Creating History now, wherever you get your podcasts.
It's quite sad that it sounds the way you're talking as if the prison system, in a way, has created that rage inside him that's left him languishing in jail for all those years. And I suppose he's in his 70s now. And as we said in the introduction, murderers have gone free in that time. Rapists have gone free. And there's a man caged like an animal in prison somewhere who the prison system are perhaps not thinking that they will entertain a release of. Does that make you, as just a man yourself, do you feel sad? You know Charlie well, and does it make you sad or does it make you just really angry?
I'm really angry. I think it's absolutely appalling. He has never raped, he's never murdered, he's taken people hostage, but he's never killed anybody because he didn't have enough rage inside him to do that. In order to kill somebody, you have to have a disrespect for other human beings. That's what I found in my work. They've always themselves been treated by lumps of wood, so they assume other people are lumps of wood, so you chop them up. Now, he never qualified for that, and he has never killed, and he never will kill, because he's always got the back of his mind, which is what you should learn in childhood, is that other people are interesting, other people are a possible source of social delight. Don't kill them, otherwise you're cutting something off that you need, that you like, that you enjoy.
And has the hostage taking been in prison as a result of the being locked in a cell 23 hours a day and having no real social contact with anybody?
Worse. It's worse than that. The hostage taking is because the prison staff have been at war with him. Okay, so who's in charge of the war in prison? You mentioned the war in prison. Who's in charge? Who's running the prison? Is it Charlie? No. Charlie says, I'm at war with prison. You say, just a minute, Charlie. This is a penitentiary system and we don't have war. You put people in there to dissuade him. You say, no, Charlie, we're not at war. He has been at war. Like I say, he described going to a new prison. He sees a row of 6 officers lined up. They're like, we're going to get you. And they get him. They get him. And they kick him. And they put footprints on his skull. For goodness sake. The prison service, if there was a royal commission or investigation, they would come out very, very badly. So guess what? They won't do it. But if they did it, they are responsible for 50 years imprisonment.
Bob, how do you think, if he was released, how do you think he could spend his days?
I know exactly how he'd spend his days. He would spend his days doing his cartoons. He would spend his days in social contact. It's very easy to get on with. You just have to put out your mind all the crap that's thrown at him and thrown at you about him. You have to relate to him. He's a very intelligent man. He's very sociable. He likes a joke. If he keeps all his cards are full of, and his cartoons are full of jokes, for goodness sake, he'd get on very well, provided A, he's rehabilitated, starts socializing again, B, is protected, and has enough social support, which I would give whatever I need or whatever I can give to give him the social support, and he would make a success of it, no question.
Bob, it's quite something to say on True Criminals that you would be willing to help and support him. I think that's an incredible thing to say. And in what ways do you feel if he were released, you would be able to help support him to make sure that he was rehabilitated properly and could cope and wasn't taken advantage of?
Well, leave out the last one. I couldn't protect him. But what I would do is support him. I would increase his morale. I've got evidence here all through the years. In fact, I think he sent a postcard to you recently, Martin, mentioning respect for me. So I've got some status with him, which I would use. I would go a weekly Zoom, no problem. I'd go and visit him. Not every week, but I would certainly support him every week, and I would have an open contact with him to do so, partly because of the appalling treatment that he's received at the hands of the state. I think that's unjustifiable. I think it's inexcusable, and I think it's quite wrong, and some heads should roll.
He's got a new parole hearing coming up, Bob, as you know. It would be good for him if you were called to give evidence. I don't suppose there's much chance of that, is there?
The quick answer is probably no. But there's a sad story about that. I saw a prisoner in Wakefield, and I happened to be able to record the interview, and it was 70 minutes long. And this man revealed to me some of the trauma he'd had, and I said, stand up for yourself. You're not 11 anymore. When the trauma happened, you're 26. Tell him to stop. And he changed. He wrote me a beautiful letter saying that my intervention had given him confidence. He'd now got enough confidence to get married. This upset the prison service. They put in another psychiatrist who said, no, Johnson's quite wrong. It's not PTSD, it's personality disorder. And this doctor took me to the GMC. They said I was a danger to the patient, danger to the public, and they threatened to strike me off. So I spent 10 months battling that. And in the end, I thought, well, they're going to strike me off unless I do something drastic. So I said, well, there's one patient who's a result of this, and that's a prisoner, so I won't go into prison again, okay? Call off the hounds. So that did. But unfortunately, in that, I'd called off all prison work. So I sent the result, the conclusion, saying they'd accepted my word. I sent that off to a QC, Edward Fitzgerald, and said, does this exclude me from the Court of Appeal? And he said, unfortunately, it does. Now, Charlie came up for Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal was on PTSD, which is my speciality, and I was unable to appear on his behalf. It's terrible.
That's a shame. I'd just like to bring Martin into our conversation. Bob, you read us kindly some of the letters that Charlie sent you, but also not only have you had postcards and bits and pieces, Martin, Charlie's sent you voice notes, which we listened to an excerpt of at the beginning of this podcast. Tell us about your relationship with him and what you make of him as a man.
I've had an extraordinary relationship with him, not quite like Bob's. And I was encouraged to write to him from about the mid-90s. He really wasn't famous or infamous by that point, but another crime reporter had encouraged me to make contact. And as soon as I did, I got this amazing response and was flooded with cartoons and letters, very erudite letters. And it just showed me a side of Charles Bronson that was nothing like I expected. He wasn't the Neanderthal monster that some newspapers were portraying him as. I was a journalist looking for stories, of course, and it was a very profitable relationship. But I think I went beyond that because I felt it was important to draw attention to what was really going on in his life in prison and started to examine the reasons why he was still there. And that really became the overarching impetus for me to keep in touch with him. I really wanted to draw attention to his plight.
The word scapegoat comes to me. The word scapegoat, because the public at large want a rogues gallery. They want an evil man to hate. And Charlie sounds like that. He's not. There are many people much more dangerous than him, much more risky, much more out of control. He knows what he's doing to a degree. All his push-ups and press-ups and stuff that he got on the Guinness Book of Records, that's dedication. That's clear mind. He's got a clear mind. And when the prison staff attack him, he plots war back again. If they didn't attack him, he wouldn't plot war. Or if somebody said to him, look, we're sorry that these people attacked you, we will make sure it doesn't happen again, he would stop.
And if a member of the public attacked him, I mean, this is the fundamental argument, isn't it, that he's a risk, still a risk to the public. But if he was outside, if he was free, and a member of the public attacked him or wound him up, what would his response be? Would he be a risk to the public?
There's two distinct things, winding him up or hitting him. If he's at war with somebody in the public, that shouldn't happen, right? The police should protect him from being at stake from somebody attacking him. I think probably not. I can't guarantee it, but he didn't have this bottled up rage, which I'm looking for, which hits anything which moves. That's my very clear lesson from Parkhurst. People hit crime or murder because of unprocessed rage. There's something going on inside which is boiling and they can't get it out of their system. Now, he hasn't got that. He hasn't had that. He's been attacked. He's been appallingly treated. Just the idea of being in solitary for nearly 50 years or whatever it is, that's an appalling, aggressive thing for the state to do to anyone, certainly a citizen. So he's responding to that, but he's responding within limits. Now, the problem that you describe is he's out there and he hasn't got limits. He has limits. Some of the prisoners, one chap in particular, said, they'd be daft to let me out, I would kill again. Now, I wouldn't let anybody out who said that. Now, Charlie never said that and he never will do that.
Just a final thought. Do you get any indication from your correspondence with him that perhaps he dreams of life on the outside?
The one I quoted you from 2003 says, I'm going for a parole board, I think I'll win. He hopes to be released, and I say I've met his friend from the outside who's been in regular telephone contact with him, and they hope he'll be relieved. So he'd love it, and I think it's about time that the state woke up and did the right thing.
Bob, it's been fascinating talking to you, as it always is, but it's good to have you on True Criminals. Thank you so much for your time and your amazing insights.
Well, that's very kind of you, Martin. I've always enjoyed it. Nice to meet you, Helen, too.
Well, Martin, Dr. Bob was another incredible guest from your little black book of contacts. I think one of the most shocking things that I've been left with following our interview is when he was telling us about the fact that I suppose Bronson's reputation went before him, and when he went to a new prison, the guards were lined up to kick him, and at one point he had footprints on his head. Do you think the prison system have created a monster, and how has this kind of behaviour been allowed?
I think he's unique. There are lots of dreadful, violent people in prison, and I think Charlie Bronson is in a category of his own. But I think as we've heard from Bob, and I know from my own experience, there's an awful lot more to Charles Bronson than the violence. And the violence is something that he hasn't exhibited for probably the best part of 10 years. So that question about, is he still in prison because he's violent, or is he violent because he's still in prison, was the conundrum that hung above his head for many, many years. But you can't argue that that's part of it now, because he hasn't been violent. Has the prison system created a monster? Well, I remember Erwin James is a famous ex-prisoner, a killer, turned criminologist, turned writer, who said very famously that, in his opinion, Charles Bronson is now being punished for being Charles Bronson.
I can understand that, having listened to Dr. Bob there. I wonder, has the penal system perhaps been incapable of nuance and imagining rehabilitation and a future for him? And I ask that thinking about Bob's methods, which were to show respect to prisoners and give them the choice whether to come to him or not, as being seen as controversial.
Yeah, but Dr. Bob's approach in those early days in Parkhurst was to talk to prisoners rather than give them drugs. It just seems a very sensible way of dealing with it. But the prison service didn't like what Bob was doing, and the funding for his programme was withdrawn after a couple of years. And we've heard the effect that it had, as he articulated in a letter, the effect it had on Charles Bronson, saying that he would miss him because Bob had made a breakthrough with him and with others. Rehabilitation, rehab is one of the two things that happen in prison, or should happen. One is punishment, one is rehabilitation. But it's difficult to see how hard the prison authorities have tried, I think, to rehabilitate Charles Bronson. And I'm not suggesting that it's easy, but Bob, I think, did show that he could make progress with somebody like him. And that programme was ended, and it feels as though nobody has really attempted to do what Dr. Bob was doing all those years ago, and that's perhaps one of the reasons why Bronson is still in prison.
Bob talked a little bit about the cartoons and the sketches that Charles Bronson sent him over the years, and they're not just about rage, are they, but perhaps a sense of grief for the life that he's lost and may never actually have.
Yes, Bronson says that his art is very much a part of him, and they are largely very, very depressing depictions of certainly how he sees his predicament, but they're not entirely without hope. There is one drawing that he sent me where he says that you can cut through that despair by having a dream, and he still dreams of being released. Now, I watched in on his last parole hearing, and he was full of hope that he would be released or moved to an open prison. None of that happened, but he's got another hearing coming up. He's still clinging to the hope that something more will be done to perhaps start proper rehabilitation and move him to a less restrictive regime within the prison service that maybe will end up in an open prison and freedom. But then even if that were to happen, and I doubt it, you've got that big issue of what's it going to be like after 50 years of being institutionalised? What's it going to be like for somebody like him to go out into the world and try and cope with all those advances that will look crazy to him after so long inside prison? He hasn't really been freed since the late 70s.
To some, he's a working-class rebel who hasn't perhaps kowtowed to the system, whatever that's thrown at him, and to others he's perhaps seen more as a psychopath. But strip away the myth and you're left with Michael Peterson, a boy who robbed a post office for £26 and has been trapped really ever since.
Well, he admits that a lot of it is his fault. He once wrote to me saying that he reckoned that he probably deserves to have served about 30 years of the 50 years that he's done because of the violence that he's got involved in. It's difficult to get rid of that myth entirely, I think, because for those of us who've got to know him, first through his notoriety, but later to discover his art and the way he articulates his life, he's always going to be this rather mythical figure of Charles Bronson. But I think I've shown, and certainly Dr. Bob has articulated, that there is so much more to Charles Bronson. And the fact that there perhaps is a reluctance to let him out because life would be very, very difficult for him, that's no excuse to keep him locked up.
Let's give Charles Bronson the final word, Martin, and end this episode on a clip of a voice note he sent to you.
Now they keep fucking drumming it into the public. I'm a danger. Well, who am I a danger to? I've never been a danger to the public. I love people. Love them. I love the world.
Hey listeners, True Criminals is a new show and your support means everything to us. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to leave us a review. It helps us grow, reach new listeners, and keep bringing you the stories you love. This episode is brought to you by Audio Bleach Global. Our producer is Russell Barnes, with audio production by Andrew Chappell. The original score was composed by Chap Mannequin, artwork by Bleached, executive produced by Lee Mann. Follow True Criminals on Instagram at true.criminals and on YouTube at youtube.com/@true-criminals. For exclusive content and ways to support the show, visit us at patreon.com/True Criminals. For partnership opportunities, please contact us at contact@audiobleachglobal.com.